A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers are now heading to Copenhagen on Friday. Is the goal here to show our allies Congress doesn't support Trump's takeover talk?
Probably, yes. I'm not sure that matters a lot. I don't think Congress has long ceded its role in the foreign policy realm, and it's greatly diminished from where it was even 10 or 15 years ago. So yeah, they're going to go there and they're going to talk a big game. But at the end of the day, it's Donald Trump who's made clear that he doesn't really care about Congress's opinion. It's like, cool, interesting, but I'm going to do what I want anyway, because Congress has been remarkably clear here, which is they don't believe that the United States should be, I would say the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats have said we're not interested in owning Greenland. And undoubtedly, if the president were to pursue this, on the off chance that Greenland is going to accede and say, yes, we'll be part of the United States, Congress is going to have to be involved. The president's going to need money. He's going to need laws to make that the case. So, again, I don't know that this trip is going to really move the needle much besides just words, but it is significant nonetheless.
Yeah, speaking of money, there's reporting from NBC that it could cost them $700 billion for the U.S. to acquire. They've done their own analysis and estimates there. That's half the annual U.S. defense budget, just to put that into perspective. Vaughn, another flashpoint we're watching is Iran. Tehran threatening U.S. bases in the region. The AP now reporting that the U.S. is pulling personnel out of our biggest base in Qatar. What is the administration saying?
The president of the United States yesterday, Anna, suggested that help was on the way to those protesting in Iran. But when asked specifically what that means, he said that you would like to know and that it's a good thing. But again, we don't have specifics or whether there is actually any action that has been taken by this White House here in time. Of course, again, this is another question of the potential use of military force without congressional approval. This comes 7 months after those initial strikes that took out the Iranian nuclear facilities. I want to let you listen to the president directly address the situation unfolding in Iran.
To all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the name of the killers and the abusers that are abusing you. I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way.
Help is on its way is the line that the president keeps repeating. And of course, there are deep questions about what that would look like, whether strikes or whether ground forces, what would be the ultimate outcome and the goal of any such effort. Of course, that is a very different mission than one in which the U.S. military goes and strikes nuclear facilities. That is one in which you're looking into Iran. This is a place where the president has suggested in the past 7 months ago that the people of Tehran should evacuate. He ended up taking no such military efforts in the city. But there are questions about what the actual intentions of the president are and how he sees the end game ultimately being and whether regime change in Iran is enough.
General, how imminent does a threat or some kind of military action need to be for the Pentagon to do an evacuation like this at a U.S. base in Qatar, a key base in the region?
Yeah, so again, what you need to take a look at is more than just the U.S. base in Qatar. When you look at Iran, they're surrounded by U.S. military, whether it be in Kuwait, whether it be in Iraq, Syria, you name it, Saudi Arabia. So they're surrounded. And so I know we're talking about Qatar there, but the bases throughout and the U.S. interests throughout are enormous. And so it can't just be Qatar we're thinking about. As the U.S. CENTCOM commander is thinking, he's thinking about the region and not only the forces in the region. What about the embassies in the region? What about the civilian populace in the region? So there's a lot to consider here when we're talking about U.S. interests in the region and protecting those interests. And so as we take a look at that, it's going to take days if we were to conduct a military operations to really secure the folks in the region. And additionally, we have much of our combat capability now in the Western Hemisphere. And so take a look on whether those things start to move back to the CENTCOM AAR. And I think that will give you some keys on whether or not we're actually going to conduct a significant strike in the region.
Yeah, all those military assets were put in position because of actions against Venezuela or involving Venezuela. So you're right. They have repositioned some. We'll be watching those movements. Josh, the president hasn't specified his end game, but he does keep lobbying these threats. He's talked about red lines. Has the president backed himself into a corner with Iran?
Well, he certainly has, because he's laid out this red line. It almost evokes when President Obama famously laid out that red line on Syria chemical weapons use and then clearly regretted that. And here he's said, look, if we see deaths of protesters starting to mount, then there will be U.S. action. Guess what? There's no question right now that we are seeing a significant number of deaths of protesters in Iran. In fact, as you pointed out, most of the estimates are starting to make clear this likely exceeds anything we've seen in previous rounds of protests, perhaps since the revolution in '79, but clearly in a long time. And so it's difficult to see how the president would maintain credibility on those types of ultimatums if he were not to take some type of action now that we are seeing these body bags, these videos and photos emerge, even despite the Iranian regime's efforts to crack down on the internet. Now, that having been said, reactions can take a lot of forms, including cyber, including other potential steps that could be short of a U.S. kinetic military intervention in Iran. And so we'll have to wait and see what type of action the president does order, if any.
Meantime, Jake, where does the Venezuela war powers resolution stand? We know the White House has been upping pressure on Republicans.
Yeah, so we just scooped, my colleague Andrew DeSterio just scooped that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, writing in his role as national security advisor, he holds dual, actually many roles, is that the U.S. has no active hostilities, no troops in Venezuela, and thus, in some people's minds, certainly the administration's mind, renders a War Powers Act resolution moot. And it's moved, at least it seems like Josh Hawley, the Republican senator from Missouri, who seems to be using this letter as a reason to strip the resolution of its privilege and thereby kill it, or try to kill it. So this is going to be something to keep an eye on over the next day.
All right. Thank you so much, Jake Sherman, Von Hillier, Josh Lederman, and Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. Appreciate it, guys. Up next.